Hello and welcome to the annual WriteHive conference. This year is packed with a ton of great sessions for writers, uh, uh, writing professionals, and the publishing industry. WriteHive is a nonprofit serving the writing community with free and inclusive resources, events, programming, connections, and more. The 2024 conference brings you this session, Pitch Is It About Word? My name is Bradley. I will be the moderator for this panel, and I'm here with three amazing panelists, Lacy Phillips, CJ Hamilton, and Keir Alekseii. Hi, everyone. So first, I will give each panelist a moment to present themselves, starting with CJ.
Hi, everyone. My name is CJ Hamilton. I am a sci-fi and fantasy writer. I have also been a pitch mentor for pitch events such as DV Pit, Pit Black, Diz Pit, and several others, Swana Pit. I truly enjoy helping marginalized and BIPOC writers be able to leverage resources that would otherwise be inaccessible to them. I'm the founder and creator of Diverse Creative Spaces, which is a Twitter Spaces directed to illuminate information that would otherwise be gatekept in the publishing industry. And I myself am a writer. My novel that I pitched in DV Pit got over 90 agent requests and 35 editor requests. And that is the one I'm currently revising to be queried. So I'm very excited to be here and looking forward to it.
Thank you. Lacy?
Hello, I am a communication strategist. I do currently social media and digital communications with PS Literary Agency and help organize the virtual JaneCon conference. I also do a little bit of writing, don't have anything finished, which is my Achilles heel. But I additionally do the ACE author chat during Asexuality Week in October's. And that previously had been like a Twitter chat format, and we're looking at other ways to continue that conversation now.
All right. And Keir. Sorry. All right. And Keir.
Hi, so my name is Keir Alekseii. I am an associate literary agent at Azantian Literary. I have been an agent for exactly 2 years, I think, actually. Right now, this weekend is my agentversary, so to speak. And I specialize in science fiction and fantasy for adult and young adult voices. I also do young adult contemporary, and I work exclusively with marginalized and underrepresented voices in publishing.
Right. So first question, what are the different purpose of pitches? Keir?
Sure. So I'm actually really glad this is our first question, because I think that a lot of people feel like a pitch is a pitch and that's the end of the discussion. But I think that your pitch is really going to change depending on who you are pitching to. So in my experience as an agent, typically I'm receiving pitches as an agent, so that's one. And then I am sending pitches to an editor, so that's two. And then an editor is often pitching to their acquisitions committee, so that's three. And then as a writer, before you're even pitching an agent, when you are looking for spaces to develop your work, you're looking for critique partners and beta readers and so on, that's another pitch. And at each of these stages, your purpose is going to be a little bit different, because you're seeking a different audience and you're seeking a different kind of engagement with your work. But overall, I do think that the one sort of underlying purpose of any pitch is to get people interested and to give them a clear understanding of what your work is about.
All right. Lacy?
That was really interesting that you mentioned that one of the main types of pitches is pitching people who you might want to collaborate with, like pre-publication, like pitching to a beta reader, because I've done that before and I did not think of it as pitching to them. I was just having a conversation, which I think probably is one of the best ways to do pitching is just, it's an ongoing conversation. One of the types of pitches that I deal most with is nonfiction proposals, which is a pitch, but we use different terminology for it, for virtual Jane Con. So this would be people who want to present at the conference, and it's their like ideas about what they want to talk about. And in those cases, when you're doing a nonfiction proposal, you don't have to have the project like fully ideated even. You don't have to have the research done. So those are kind of their own special breed of pitch. It's like, what topic are you interested in spending more time with is kind of what you're trying to get across in those situations. So, and just to be clear, I work with PS Literary Agency. I do not interface with the query inbox at all there. So I have people occasionally ping me about that. I'm like, no, that's not what I do with them. But thank you for asking. So, yeah, so most of what I deal with are nonfiction pitches or proposals. So that's very different. So I'll have a different perspective going forward with the questions.
All right, and CJ?
I would like to reiterate much of what Keir said. I think also pitches are a good way to get your manuscript and your writing materials, your story ideas in front of the people that could eventually publish them. I also think some of the purpose of pitching will be when you're pitching to consumers. So the back cover of a book is a pitch, and we're pitching directly to the reader. And in media, film, and TV, the trailers are pitches. So you'll always be pitching in your publishing career, in your career as a writer. I think it's probably the most important skill you could cultivate as a writer. I think also another thing that we forget that we're pitching is ourselves as part of our stories. So that's also a skill to cultivate.
That is so interesting. If I can just tag on a little bit there. One of the things that I do a lot of is writing ad copy, like someone has to write the tweets, and I'm someone. And I don't always have to do this, but one of the things, we had a book with one of our agency clients come out that had gotten like middling reviews with the advanced readers. And it seemed to me like reading through them, people just didn't know what they were getting because they sent it to a bunch of horror readers, but it is very much like a humor horror hybrid, and people did not know what to do with that. So it was like 3 stars. I didn't know what this was, you know? So when it came time for release day, my part of how, you know, boosting this work out into the world, I was like, how can we make sure that the people who might want to click this link to go pre-order this book know what they're getting, so that they're not dissatisfied, so that they have some kind of, because I don't think the back cover copy, like you talked about, that is a pitch to readers. And I don't think it was positioned correctly from the publisher. So I tried my best to kind of slant the back cover copy in, you know, like tweet form, to make sure it was reaching the right audience at that point, which is pretty late in the game.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because I think that I guess the way I would describe that is that you're really setting expectations, right? So this is about setting expectations for whoever is about to pick up the book. At the stage you were at, that was already the consumer, that was the reader, right?
Yeah.
And then for the writer, you're pitching it to set expectations for the agent when you're querying. And then the agent is pitching it to set expectations for the editors when they pick up the book. And I do think that sometimes those expectations are a little bit different from from the end result audience, right? Like the reader, the consumer. Because sometimes when you're pitching a book that is like super, what people would call super commercial, and very accessible, and like, you know, because I work specifically in science fiction and fantasy, you know, something that's like lightly speculative instead of more mainstream fantasy or like heavier fantasy, you know, you're going to pick up readers who are not necessarily fantasy readers or science fiction readers, right? Because you're aiming to get those folks. But when I'm sending a book to an editor, typically I should not be worried about whether or not that editor knows how to interpret fantasy or how to engage with like heavier SFF or speculative work. And so the way I pitch it to an editor is probably going to look a little bit different to how a team ultimately pitches that book, right?
Yeah.
To the audience, I mean, ultimately pitches that book to the audience.
Absolutely. And if I can just add one more thought that just came to me when Keir was speaking about the different stages of pitching in the industry. I think at the very earliest stage, one of the primary purposes of a pitch is for the writer to boil down the essence and concept of their book so that they themselves are familiar with the very basic story that they're trying to tell. And this is what we see in oftentimes when we see the New York Times list, we see a 1 or 2 liner. And that's a very concise, but very true to the point about the story. And so I think a lot of writers think that pitches have to be elaborate and very over the top. But at the end of the day, what really matters is that concentrated info.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so next question. What components contribute to a successful pitch? Lacy?
I think we were just talking about that, which is like boiling it down to the most succinct, like encapsulation of what your story is about as possible. So, you know, when you think about the basic elements, you want to cover like who, what, when, and where. And I think if you're going for something that's like your elevator pitch where you've got 2 floors, you've got maybe a minute, 2 minutes to really get to the point, you can probably not mention when unless it's maybe like a sci-fi story where when is incredibly central to the plot. But if you're talking like contemporary, you can leave that as assumed and just don't waste words with when. Where you might also be able to skip unless that is important in the story. I would say if you had to go to, because this is a lot of what I do, is like take the back cover copy, which oftentimes they have a lot of questions in them. Will they succeed or whatever? And I can't use any of that because I have to have it much shorter for social media captions. So a lot of what I'm doing is synthesizing what the story, what the editors have given to the marketing team and the marketing team has given to me, which is still not short enough. So then I have to kind of decide what the most important things are. And I often end up with who and what only, what happened and who did it happen to is the only thing that I can fit, and then a link. That's it. So I would say if you're looking for what components you really have to have down, the who and what are the most important things.
All right. Keir?
I think I feel like I learned a lot of this really formulaically. I don't know if that's a word, but I'm gonna claim it anyway. When I started learning, and this was before I started agenting in 22, but in 2021 I started my mentorship with Jen Azantian, who heads the agency that I'm at today. And even before I started working with Jen, when I was just a writer in a pitch wars server trying to figure out what a pitch is and how to pitch and where to find these opportunities, a lot of what I learned was very formula based. It was very goal, motivation, conflict. Right? You're looking for, the mantra is that you're always looking for the goal, you're always looking for the motivation, you're always looking for the conflict. You need the GMC. And I hate to say it because I'm not a person who particularly loves the word, like just compressing things into a formula. Like I don't love that. But I do think that it's true. I think that regardless of your story's shape or form, because I do want to put out there that, a lot of people, we also talk about like the 3-act structure and Freytag's pyramid and the hero's journey. And I think that that's just a very small subset of the types of stories that we have out there. But even when we have stories from places that do not hold to that structure, right? Like they're frame stories or they're much more meandering, they follow the oral tradition a lot more clearly or specifically. I think that even in all of those stories, our protagonists always have a goal. Our protagonists are always motivated by something, and there's always something causing tension. And that thing that's causing tension is what we typically would say is the conflict. So I think that a successful pitch very clearly tells me where the tension is, who my character is, and what's happening to my character / what my character is doing. Right? And I feel like that's what people are trying to say when they say goal, motivation, conflict. I've also just talked a whole lot, so I'm going to pass it to CJ.
Well, I completely agree with what Keir is saying. I understand also about the formulaic structures, which a lot of times are not represented in stories from marginalized communities, because we tend to write stories from oral storytelling styles or from non-Western storytelling styles. So I think in those cases, pitches can look a little different. So whenever a writer asks me what they should start with, I generally tell them 3 things: hook, tension, and stakes. These are the 3 components that if you can get into a pitch, you can essentially catch the interest of most people, whether it be publishing professionals or agents or even CPs or beta readers, or eventually your consumer, the reader themselves. So I think Twitter does really well about condensing that, because you have this character limit. So the pitch events that we see on Twitter, they force writers to boil down and concentrate their pitches and their story ideas into these things. So I feel like the pitches that do really well always have these 3 elements: hook, attention, and stakes.
I love that. I think that that's also so much clearer and more encompassing and inclusive than goal, motivation, conflict. I like that so much more. I think that from like when you're pitching to an agent or when an agent is pitching an editor, something too is like the way and the reason that we use comparative titles or competitive titles, depending on how you want to go with comp. Because a comp title could be comparative or competitive. And I think that if you're pitching an agent, you absolutely need to have those comp titles. But also, one of the reasons that comp titles are so important is kind of like what Lacy was saying earlier about understanding what the expectations are for this book, right? Like, where do those expectations sit? And I think that that's a big part of comp titles. And there's also, I'm trying to remember, there's a way that I've heard it phrased before that I was going to say that sticks with me, but since I'm forgetting it now, I guess it didn't stick that hard. But basically, I'm sure that folks have heard of the idea of a high concept pitch, right? Like I've heard people throwing that term around all the time. And typically when they say a high concept pitch, what they mean is that they can encompass the story and understand what the story is in 1 line or less than 1 line. Yeah. And I think that it is my personal opinion, right? So don't at me. This is just me. It is my opinion that any book can be pitched high concept. I think any book can be pitched high concept. Whether or not you are successful at pitching it high concept is its own question. But I do think that you can condense any story into something that is very easy to understand or easy to digest. And that ultimately is what they mean when they say something like high concept, or what makes a successful pitch is that it is very easy to digest. I very clearly understand what this book is about and why I should care about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of those things that, you know, those games that people play on different social media platforms where it's like, explain your favorite movie badly. That is a really great, like,
that's
exercise.
Great practice.
Yeah, it's great practice because like pick whatever book you read last or your favorite movie and try to play that game with yourself, and then you can start doing it with your own writing, because that kind of gets you into the habit of picking out those like highlight elements and putting them together as succinctly as possible in a way that makes sense. Because what that allows you to do is kind of, you then are able to know what your readers coming from their cultural backgrounds are already assuming about the world they live in or the different genre expectations that they already know, that you can then take out of your pitch and just leave the important elements.
I think it's also important to note, this is one of the most common things I come across that writers, especially newer writers, are most confused about. What's the difference between tension and what's the difference between stakes? And so I think it's like possibly one of the reasons why we see pitches that don't get at the point of the novel. And the difference, in my opinion, between tension and stakes is stakes are the consequences. They are what the characters stand to lose or gain in the events of this novel. But the tension are the obstacles that stand in the character's way, or the twists and turns that they're going to encounter along the way. So tension is meant to amp up and kind of create more interest, more intrigue throughout the novel, but the stakes are, this is the end point. This is what they're going to lose, what they're going to gain. And if you can kind of disseminate that out in your novel, when you're thinking about, okay, what's the best pitch? What's the best way to put my novel forward? Then you're already in a strong place.
Mm.
All right. So to continue on this subject, why do you make pitches, and how do strategy shift based based on the venue? CJ?
Sure. So I think we were also just expanding on that a little bit, about the different types of platforms. So I think Twitter is a great medium to get started, especially if you're a newer writer and you want to build community, you want to have access to opportunities. There's a lot of good mentorships, a lot of good pitch events still, even though we are seeing that some have left the platform, but there are still pitch events that are accessible. So I think other than Twitter, certain agencies and publishing houses will do open submissions, and they require a synopsis. So a synopsis is also a longer form of a pitch. So you can extrapolate a pitch out into a very well-written synopsis, as long as you know the elements of your story and you're willing to summarize them. I think other than Twitter and the open submissions, if you're not, because I'm always wary to recommend something, there's a lot of scams and a lot of things that you have to be extremely wary about as a writer. So I would say just cross-reference, double check everything. And it's a good place to start on Twitter. And as to your second question, Brad, how do the strategies shift based on the venue? Well, if it's a Twitter pitch, you have to be concise. You also have to know your comparative titles, which is what Keir was talking about earlier. I think comparative titles are part of the hook, in my opinion, because they're the first thing that we're going to see. Even if we're writing a query letter to an agent or a letter to the editor pitching the novel as an agent, then the comparative titles become incredibly important. So choosing your comparative titles, I would say try to choose something that's on the newer end within the past 5 years. Something, I know that people are wary of going big, but I like to go big or go home. So I say if it fits for your novel, choose it, and also wind in how those elements are reflected in your novel. So if you're going to choose something like The Hunger Games, that should be reflected in the body of the pitch as well.
All right. Lacy?
So one of the things that is really interesting to see, and I just did one of these workshops recently, is the live pitch sessions. So of course, I wasn't taking pitches, I was giving a presentation, and in the room next door, the participants in this workshop were pitching to agents live, just across a table. And I think they had a 5-minute time limit. And one of the things that my colleague Eric Smith is always reminding everyone, if you're doing a live pitch session, he loves these, he does a lot of them, leave time for questions. So he's always reminding people, you have to leave some time. So you'll want to time yourself giving your pitch. And if you know that you are going to be capped at 5 minutes, that's the time that you have. time yourself giving your pitch for 3 minutes of that time to allow the agent a little bit of space to ask follow-up questions on anything they want to dig in on that maybe you didn't cover enough or that they're just curious about. So that's one of the strategies that would shift if you're doing a live session, is you need to be extra concise and leave a little bit of space for a conversation about the work.
All right, and Keir?
I definitely agree with Lacy and CJ. I think that a couple of the strategy changes that I've noticed just happening like in real life as I watch, and that I think that other people could use and take advantage of, is that if you're doing something like a Twitter pitch or something where agents and editors are going to be looking at your work amongst hundreds of other pitches, thousands of other pitches that day, then you want to use the big, very easily recognizable comp titles, right? So like instead of, so you can use a book and a movie, or 2 movies, or TV shows, or vibes. I mean, you want it to be just very easy to consume and recognize when you're looking at those comp titles. Versus if you were querying, you should absolutely have books in addition to any other like comparative material. I tell people who ask me this usually that if you want to query me with movies and TV shows, that's fine. You can put that on to the end of your metadata paragraph, but you should really include at least 2 novels so that I know I have an idea when I'm picking this up where I might want to put it on the shelf. I might disagree. I might come up with entirely different titles for this book, and I have done that, right? I'll be like, oh, I can totally see your comps for X and Y, but I think we should comp it to A and B instead, when we go on sub. And so I think there's that. And for live pitches, yes, definitely leave time. But also in a live pitch, you can make your pitch a little bit longer. I would always recommend in live pitches that you have your comp title and like a 1-line pitch, and then a short like 2 or 3 sentence paragraph to go with that. And you make sure that you share like your genre and your age category and whatnot as well. And that's usually the structure that I recommend to folks who are doing a pitch for the first time. And write it down. I know like some people feel all sorts of ways about writing it or not writing it down, or having or not having notes. I think you should feel comfortable to write it down and read from it, because we recognize that this is a nerve-wracking situation, and you're probably nervous. I think that not all agents would agree with me, but my personal opinion is feel free to write it down. Like, you're here as a writer, not a public speaker. Like, we're not going to hold it against you that you're reading from your index card or whatever.
Yeah, totally. If you need to just read your query email, just read it. It's fine. That's okay.
All right, next question. What are some common misconceptions about pitching that you would like to refute? Keir?
I'm not sure I'm the best person to go first for this, because I think I've been so deep in this headspace for so long. I don't know what the misconceptions are anymore. Like, I genuinely am not certain that I know what people think is the pitch thing, and then it's actually wrong. Like, I don't know what the misconceptions are anymore.
Okay, well, Lacy?
There is a big misconception that people pass. This is the conversation that pops up every 6 weeks or so, it seems like. And that is the conversation around, you have to have X number of followers on social media before you can get an agent. Agents don't want you if you don't have a huge following already. And I know who we find, and I know that that is not true. We have several recent signings whose books will be going out on sub very soon, who aren't on social at all. They have made that choice for themselves. You don't have to have a huge following for to get that attention. So I know that that is a thing that people say. They're like, don't start querying until you've built up a, those people don't know what they're talking about. Listen to actual agents and actual people, actual editors at publishing houses before you listen to random people on the internet who are telling you things that might not be true. Another thing is I really would love for us all to stop using the word rejection when we're talking about pitching and querying. It's a pass. It's a pass, and language matters. Because when you hear the term rejection, you feel like it's a reject. You take it, you internalize that term, and it's a rejection of you. It's a rejection of your work. It's not. It's just a pass. They're passing on representing your work. They're passing on, an editor makes a pass on accepting, that work for, and that happens for all kinds of different reasons, and I know I'll let one of the agents speak on that because I'm not an agent, but I would love for us to shift the terminology we're using. I think that would be a really important shift to make. And also, I'm not wild about the graphical interface on Query Tracker. Because it's a little green happy face that turns into a little red sad face. You can't not attach emotionality to that because it's being forced on you by the graphical interface. If I could, anybody from Query Tracker team who's developers, staff, if we could change that to like a check and an X or a circle and a square, anything other than what it is right now with a sad face, I think that would help people a lot. Because these visual cues and the terminology that we're currently using right now in the space of publishing is not helpful. It's just not. And I think that would be, if anyone takes anything away from this, from my portion, I hope it's this. I hope it's this.
Oh, CJ?
Well, I fully support Lacy in her endeavor to remove those nasty emojis from the Query Tracker. Yes, submitting to an agent or just publishing in general is quite a depressing and lonely journey. Anything we can do to make it a little lighter would be very helpful, I think, for everybody involved. I think a common misconception that I'd like to kind of shed a little light on, I often get writers that tell me, oh, my novel, it doesn't lend itself well to a pitch. It really can't be pitched. And I often think of the different ways that we can pitch. So I think every novel can be pitched and should be pitched. If you haven't found a way to pitch your novel, it's because you haven't found the right way to pitch your novel. So even for the generic Twitter pitch events that we see, it's not just, comps and then the body of the pitch and then the hashtags. You can have comps and then bullet points, which are just illuminating the major elements, like giving vibes of your book. So you don't really have to follow that hook, tension, stakes format. That's just one of many. So there are different ways in which to pitch. I have seen very interesting pitches. One was pitched to the lyrics of a Taylor Swift song, and it got a lot of interest. So, if it fits the vibe of your book, because everything about a book is really vibes at the end of the day, is, we're selling vibes, we're buying vibes. Even though we think we're buying bucks, we're really buying vibes. So I think if you can just visualize and get a sense for what type of vibes can your book give to a reader, and then go from there, extrapolate out from there. So that's one of the most common misconceptions. I feel like writers get discouraged very early on because they're like, oh, I don't know how to put it in to this very formulaic or this very polished format. It doesn't have to be. You just get your vibes across. That's all.
I actually feel like this is a good, so I don't know if this is a common misconception, but I'm gonna do my best. I do feel like a lot of writers are very hard on themselves for not knowing how to pitch or not writing a great pitch or query or synopsis, etc. And I want to stress that writing a great pitch is a completely different skill set, to writing a great novel. Okay, completely different. And if you can't write an amazing pitch, that's actually okay. Like, acknowledge you're not great at this right now and that you still have to figure out what is the best way to pitch your book, like CJ says, and then work on that. Work on developing that skill as well, because it is a separate skill that you have to develop, or that you would want to learn to develop. I do also want to agree with the vibes bit. So I don't know. I go on pitch events, and a lot of the pitches that I like, they're not great pitches in terms of like the stakes and the tension and the hook or whatever, but you know, they'll just be like, these are the tropes and these are the vibes, and I'll be like, I'm into these vibes and I will like that pitch. And you know what? I currently rep at least three writers. That's how I found them, because they just had great vibes, and maybe their pitch at the time wasn't the best, but it became a lot better, you know, after we worked together, because having someone on your side who has that unbiased eye, who can look at your work and pull out those elements and show you different ways to put it together, that's huge. That's huge. You know, like, I can't do that for my own books. I can't. I struggle to pitch my own written work in ways that I do not struggle even a little to pitch my writer's work. You know, the closer you are to something, often the harder it is to take that step back. Yeah.
All right. Next question. What are the common cliches to avoid in a pitch? Keir?
Oh my gosh, there's so there's so many. I don't even know where to begin. I feel like this is another one where like my brain just like exploded with like 100 different possible things. Somebody give me somewhere to start.
What about more than meets the eye, but like what? They don't ever say what what is so special?
Oh my God. Yes. I also find, I don't necessarily feel like I hold this against a query, but like when I'm writing a pitch to send to an editor, I hate the question at the end. Like, I hate ending. Me personally, I dislike ending a pitch with a question. I'm like, how many? Because the question is always like 1 of 5, right?
Yeah.
Like, will they choose X or will they choose Y? Will they decide to do this? Will they, you know, will this happen or won't it happen? And I'm just like, please stop asking me that question. I don't like, it's not that I don't care, because I should care, like, based on the rest of your pitch, but I'm just so tired. I'm so tired of hearing it. And like, literally any of those like one-line cliches that are used to describe things in that way, I feel like you know, it's more than meets the eye, or like, you know, those kinds of things. Any of those are just a no. Just please stop using them. Because it's exactly like what you say. More than meets the eye is a perfect example, because it's like, more than what? So what is what is the more? What is it that is in the eye that I'm not mooring? What is, like, help
Yeah,
me.
exactly. Like, if you're gonna say that, like, specify at least.
Yes, yeah.
It kind of ran me off like she's not like other girls.
I think you're only allowed to use those kinds, like the she's not like other girls is a great example. You're only allowed to use those if it's like, she's not like other girls, she's a vampire or something.
No.
Like, that's the only time you can use it. She's not like other girls, she's gonna kill you in your sleep for real. Like, you know what I mean? Other girls will slash your tires or whatever, but this one will suck your blood. Like, I don't, if that's what you want to do, fine. But that is also very specific. Like, your alternative is very specific. And I think, like, when we talk about a common cliche to avoid in a pitch, I think one of the reasons that my mind just like explodes with like 1,000 different things to say about this, is that you should be avoiding all of the cliches. Like that's what it comes down to. Cliche means common, right? Like a cliche means that it's common and it's generalized. It's cliche because everybody uses it. That's how it becomes a cliche. And when you use a cliche, typically it is broad, it is vague. And when you use something that vague, it's super hard to be like, oh, this is the hook. This is what's special about your book. Because if you tell me your book is more than meets the eye, I could tell you that for every single book on my bookshelf behind me right now. Okay, that's a lot of books. You can't see my bookshelf right now, but I promise you it's a lot of books.
Do you see a correlation between query letters or pitches that use like very cliched language and the sample pages also having cliches in them?
I'm not going to answer this question because it is a whole panel by itself.
Okay.
I
fair.
will spend, I can talk about the relationship between the query letter and the pages for a long time.
Okay, 2025 WriteHive panel on.
I submitted it to Jerry afterwards.
Like CJ, I think, have we heard from CJ about common like cliches to avoid?
I was just too engrossed in what you were saying, because I completely agree with you. I think writers believe the more vague they are in their pitches, the more they can kind of control those elements. Like they don't want to give too much away, and it's a valid concern. You don't want to give the cow away unless they buy the milk. So I think it is counterintuitive in some ways. So being very specific in a pitch can help you. Also, I want to note that I'm not against a lot of cliches. I like the cliches, especially because a lot of BIPOC and marginalized communities haven't been able to do those cliches enough. And I love it when I see someone from a marginalized community that has a different storytelling style come forward with an age-old cliche or something that you would think is, okay, well, this has been done 100 times, but not by them. So I love it. I think that in of itself lends a freshness to it. So I'm not against all of them, like Keir seems to be, but I will say that specificity is your friend.
I do want to just to clarify, because like when you say that though, CJ, I feel like what you're describing is not a cliche. Like to me, what you're describing is not a cliche. Like if I saw, like it's kind of like retellings. A lot of people might feel like retellings are things that certain retellings we just have too many of, whatever, right? But it's exactly like you've said here, a lot of marginalized voices haven't had their turn at retelling those stories. And so if I saw that, I definitely wouldn't feel like that's a cliche or that's something I don't want to see, because it is something we haven't seen before. But when I talk about it, when I say cliche, I really mean something that like I see this all the time from the same people all the time, right? It's like very specific phrases or like those questions at the end of a pitch, or these questions at the end of a blurb. Like I feel like but there's just always something else that you could be doing, because we're not in like 6th grade anymore. You know what I mean? There's another way to convey this message that that there's a big choice or a big like 2 possibilities, more possibilities. You know what I mean? There are just other ways to do it.
That's more possibilities. It's one of my least favorite cliches, is like giving a character a false choice when that binary just doesn't really exist in life. And a lot of times it's like career and their love life. Why is that one or the other? It's not really. So whenever it's like so-and-so must choose between this and that, and you're like, no, they don't. They don't, though. They really don't have to choose one over the other, completely abandon one to adopt the other. That's a false choice. And I don't like that at all. It annoys me to no end. Also, there's some recent reporting out about like a list of 10 words that ChatGPT really, really loves that you can now look out for. And one of them is like delve. Nobody uses that really. ChatGPT loves it and uses it a lot. So if someone's like delve into the mystery of this town and you're like, ah, did you write this? Or maybe did you have an assist? Which certain agents are going to have opinions on, whether they're like, I'm fine with it, or if I see something and it uses this like list of top 10 words from ChatGPT, they're just going to automatically, put that away.
Like, I am definitely anti-ChatGPT, but what makes that super funny for me is that I will fully use the word delve in a sentence for real. Like me personally.
No. Maybe you
used it
should train yourself not to.
I have said IE in a sentence, speaking to
Oh,
another
sure.
human being.
Yeah.
I do say those things, and I don't know if it's like an artifact of how I code switch, or like the more formal I get in language is the more my vocabulary changes in between settings. Like I don't know what it is, but I saw that list and I was like, can I trust them? It's like I would use some of these words. But I do think that there's like an overuse versus like a more natural use that we can probably lean on. But yeah.
I would just say in general, don't let ChatGPT write your query letter, because what do you have to input into that system to get it to spit out a query letter for you? If you are foolhardy enough to dump the text of your entitled manuscript into ChatGPT, I would not want to work with you. I'm just saying that is a very bad idea. Don't do that. Because then what is ChatGPT going to do with those 70,000+ words? You don't know. Don't trust it, please.
Superhuman artist. Before we go to the next question, does anyone want to add anything? Oh. Okay. So next question: what is a tactic that can help you stand out? Starting with CJ.
A tactic to help you stand out while you're pitching.
Yeah.
I think we've covered several. One is strong comps, comparative titles, making them recent, making them fit your book, make sure that they have some common thread with your novel. I would say also choosing the best format in which to pitch, whether it's the vibey format or the more formulaic one, the hook, tension, stakes. I think another way to help you stand out would be when you pitch, knowing your moment, knowing today I see a lot of people pitching their novels in a way that it's like, I'm pitching for an event for romance writers, but you're writing mainly political fantasy with a little bit of romance in it. So it's a little outside of what you would want to even catch. So I would say like really choosing your target when you're pitching, so that way you can have the highest yield in return. Also, when you're pitching like verbally, if you have a live event such as Lacy was talking about, making sure that you're prepared. A good way is to have a sample size, a sample pool. Practice your pitch, practice it outside, pitch it to people that are not in writing and see what they think about it. If it can catch the attention of someone who's not a reader, then it can probably catch the attention of a reader, because a reader is already looking to be caught. So if you can practice it in other environments and scenarios, that would probably help you stand out greatly.
All right, Lacy?
Yeah, that's a good like piece of advice, is to like pitch it to different people. And in particular, you could pitch it to your local librarian. Like if you walk up to the reference desk and be like, hey, I'm writing a book, can I practice my pitch on you? They're not going to tell you no, get out. And librarians know their stuff. So they will even be able to help you find comp titles if you're really struggling hard with that. You can go into your library, give them your like 1 or 2 liner and be like, what does that sound like to you? What is already on the shelves in this building that that you can help me with? So that's like a super good resource. I would say one thing that you hear sometimes that floats about is oh, you know, to stand out, you could like bring donuts or send them coffee, or I don't like that piece of advice. I think maybe in the past it might have been more successful. I have celiac disease. If someone sends me donuts, that's like, that's not nice. But also
like,
that is
I am not eating a food from a stranger.
right. It's weird, right? I mean, I would love to be like a trusting person, but I'm not. I'm old enough now to have learned better. But also that's putting like an additional financial barrier in place that does not need to be there. And if you run up against someone who claims to be an agent or an editor and they are asking you to pay in any way, shape, or form to listen to their pitch, I would second guess that. There's a lot of grift happening in publishing spaces and in self-publishing spaces. There's a lot of people who aren't qualified to be giving certain advice who are trying to give advice and run workshops and courses and sell how-to books that may not be qualified to be doing that. So I would say look at everyone's credentials, you know, when you're hearing this advice. I would say like the whole baked good thing is not good advice, but I did hear that very recently, someone saying that's how they got their agent, is they brought a box of donuts to the in-person pitch. And I'm like, that is a terrible, I don't be telling people that. So yeah, I would say that's not a good way to stand out. But I would say, yeah, that being super prepared is really important. Knowing your story really deeply so that when people have questions for you, you have ready answers and you're not just going, I never thought of that. Because if you didn't think of it, you're not ready to be pitching yet. That story needs to go back into revisions. It's one of the things in my writer life that makes my relationship with the editor I work with really rewarding is when she pushes me about things, I usually have an answer about why that decision was made or not made, you know? She's like, why is it like that? And I'm like, I know exactly why it's like that, because later you'll see. And so like being prepared, like CJ was saying, is a really great way to stand out. I think that if you have those ready answers and you've thought really deeply about your whole story and an agent has a question for you and you're able to come back quickly with an answer, that gives them the sense that they can trust you, right? With the story, you're building trust with them, and they can, they know that if they choose to work with you, you're going to know your stuff. And also, if you're just pleasant to work with, I think that helps a lot. Because if some agents choose to be really editorial and have like a long relationship with their clients before they go out on submission. And if you're going to be spending that much time with someone, being able to have really easy conversations about tough things and being able to trust them with your creative output is so important. So be nice is a way to stand out. Don't be confrontational in your pitch. Because I know we see these like horror pitches that pop up online sometimes where people are like, if you pass, or if, you know, they get a pass or a rejection, they get a pass and they come back with, you just missed out. And it's like, no, I dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
I don't know if I don't know if this is a faux pas or not, but here we go. I take a note of those people.
Mm-hmm.
There was years ago now, I want to say it was late 21 or maybe early or to mid 2022.
Was it Gary? Was it Gary?
Oh no, I mean,
no.
please. First of all, I was Gary'd very early in my career, and I was like, oh, level 2 agent already achieved. I've been Gary'd.
Everyone's been Gary'd. We love it.
You know, that rite of passage happened super early, really like great. No. I think I'm not allowed to say what I want to say. It'd be an expletive about Gary, but expletive Gary, right? Like that's how I feel. No, but there was a there was a post somebody wrote about like how their dad wrote a book, and I think this was like a published writer, and they were like their dad wrote a book about a writer who went around serial killing agents who had passed on the book. Yes. A bunch of other writers had commented on it that, oh, they would read that book, or oh yeah, maybe they'll write one like it, or oh yeah, I totally understand like where so and so is coming from, or oh yeah, I definitely like feel for that protagonist, etc. And some of those comments got really not great. Like there's a certain level of ha ha ha, you know, yeah, you know, sometimes we feel like that because it's hard, like this is hard. And then there's other stuff. There's you're definitely crossing a line. If you were one of those writers, I have a screenshot of the comment that you left, and I took a screenshot of everybody who liked the post, and I have that saved in a folder, and I recognize most of the names. And when those people come up in my inbox, I sit down and I look at their manuscript, and I literally have to ask myself, is this manuscript so good that I want to work with somebody who thought killing agents who passed on a book was funny? I do, because I'm an agent. Like this was the whole, you know, premise of me being here. I'm an agent. I'm part-time right now, like most agents, but I want to be full-time soon. And I am already, because I am part-time and I'm very vigorous, I have been very vigorous in my inbox in the last couple of years. I do have authors right now who are waiting for responses from me, from queries that they sent me last year or submissions that they sent me at the end of last year, right? And some of those people are going to end up with a pass. And if I see that those folks who have a pass are subtweeting me, I'm going to be like, yeah, this is maybe a good thing that I didn't work with you. And it's not because you're not allowed to be bitter. You're allowed to be bitter. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to feel your feelings, and your feelings are valid. But from a business perspective, do I really want to work with the author who could not keep a lid on their negative emotions? Because what's going to happen when you're on sub with that? What's going to happen when somebody leaves a bad review on your book and you see it? Are you going to start a expletive storm on on social media like some other authors have, right? That's not good press. That's not good publicity. And anything you do will reflect on me as your agent. So I am sorry to say it, folks, but I do look at your social media, and I am not the only agent who does. I am not. And I will probably never be the only agent who does either. So a tactic to help you stand out is it really is be nice. It is be nice. It is be kind. It is recognize that if you get an agent and a book deal, you will become a public figure. And somebody out there who has it in for you is going to go back into your tweets and go back onto your Instagram and find your old Facebook posts that are public, or find somebody who doesn't like you, who is friends with you, and who can get screenshots onto your old Facebook. Like that happens, right? I think that if you can show that you are a decent human being and you can control those impulses, that will make you stand out. And again, I do want to make it clear that we appreciate that you are human. It's not that we expect that you don't have feelings. It's not that you're not allowed to express these feelings. You're allowed to say crappy stuff about the agents who rejected you, like in private.
And keep it in your group chat.
But keep it in your group chat.
Steam in your group chat.
That's right. That's right. That's where that belongs. Don't do it in public, right? If your group chat, like, screenshots go wide, okay, but that's a different problem. Somebody has invaded your privacy. You're not actually, like, you know what I mean? That's different. So I think that as a tactic to help you stand out is be a decent human being and know how to act like a writer online, how to act like a public figure online. Because you need to be practicing that before you're actually a public figure. Because if you can't do it now, how can I trust that you're going to do it later? The other tactic that is more specific to pitches, like specifically writing your pitch, I think is your voice. Voice is so amorphous and is just so hard to condense into like a single definition or to describe. And the voice that is in your story typically is going to help you stand out from the other manuscripts in an agent's inbox. So if you're pitching on Twitter or if you're pitching to an agent in a live pitch, try to mimic that voice of your character, of your narrator, as best as possible, because that's not just going to help us understand who we're reading or what kind of writing we're getting into, but that's part of the vibes, right? That's part of the vibes. If you're pitching your story to me in a way that your narrator would pitch it, that's kind of cool. And I already know that if you can pitch in that same voice, then that voice is probably very strong.
All right. So there was also a question I had for panelists today. So I will give each panelist a moment to either give final advice to our viewer or to plug anything they want to plug, starting with Keir.
It's always me. So I think that the last piece of advice that I would give is do not give up on finding the right way to pitch your book. If you're struggling to figure out your pitch, I think it's like CJ said earlier, you just haven't found the right way to do it yet. You haven't found the way that works for you or works for your book yet. If you feel like your pitches aren't amazing just yet, it means you just need more practice, right? It means that you just need to keep working at it. You need to work at this just like any other skill or any other part of the writing craft. And I think that's really what it comes down to, you know, is keep practicing your skill.
And do you want to plug anything?
I've got so much to plug. I I believe that by the time this video comes out, I will be opening to queries again very soon. So if you are a marginalized writer or from an underrepresented group in fiction and you write science fiction and fantasy or horror, or if you write YA contemporary, you can query me. I'm only open to adult and young adults right now. So please keep that in mind, but you can still query me. And you should look out for my clients' books later this year. Hamajang Luck, which is a great example of a pitch, actually. I pitched Hamajang Luck as lesbian space heist, which it turns out was a very successful way to pitch it. So Hamajang Luck is coming out in December of this year, 2024 in the UK, and I believe it will be followed shortly in the US in January 2025. And you can also look out for The Keeper of Lonely Spirits coming out early 25. And what is the new title of this book? The Serpent Called Mercy, which is also going to be out late this year and in early 2025. And so there are a couple others. So, you know, follow me if you would like. I am kind of still on what used to be Twitter. What's it called now? X? Yeah, that place. I still have an account there and I do use it occasionally. So it is just my name at Keir Alekseii, and it is the same on Instagram. I try to spend more time on Instagram now than I do on Twitter, but you know how it goes.
Yeah, thank you. Lacy?
Oh, I would say parting advice for people is that one of the main determiners of success in publishing is just persistence and sticking with it. So if you can work that persistence muscle, it'll get easier over time. And just you get better at being more philosophical about passes the more you have people pass on things. So if you could, before you have a novel ready, if you could do some short form work and submit that around to different publications, yeah, you might not place anything with a publication that you can then point back to on your writing CV and say, I'm published here and here and here with my short form pieces. But even if you aren't successful, what will be successful is that you will have, by the time you have a completed long form project ready to go out into the world and query with, you'll have gained a lot of perspective and a lot of ability to accept those passes in a better frame. It's not going to like, it might ruin your day, but it might not ruin your month at that point. So I would say practice sending things out. Send out short form pieces, send out poetry if you're into that kind of thing. And by the time you have a long form piece ready to go, you'll be a veteran of querying at that point. Yeah, persistence is a muscle, so do lots of exercise. Virtual Jane Con is happening July 13th and 14th. I am on the planning committee, and it's a great time. If you are a Jane Austen fan, you should. It's all online on YouTube, and we're going to have some really great sessions. I have seen all of the pitches that came into us, and we sent out acceptances on the 1st. So the full program is not live for the public yet, but I know what's going to be on it, and you guys are going to love it. So
I'm excited. Who isn't a Jane Austen fan, truly, though, Lacy? I mean, at this point, aren't we all?
yes, and we should be.
You should be.
CJ?
As far as last advice for pitching, I would say when I first started, one of the things that I did, I think has helped me the most and that I would recommend to everyone is go back and read the pitches that you really liked and study those pitches. See, there's always one thing that really stands out to us, even if we don't know it when we read it, but it's that one thing that makes that pitch really stand or stay with us for a couple days. So read the pitches that caught you, that made you want to read the book, and try to put your pitch in that format, or try to see what in your pitch would be a catching feature for someone else. I think the more that you do that, along with the great advice that Keir and Lacy have given, I think putting it all together, you should be in a really good place. Another thing is, like they've said already, pitching is a very hard journey. Sometimes you can pitch hundreds of times. Sometimes the first time you pitch, you get a monumental response. So don't think that just because somebody was successful in doing it this way and you weren't, that doesn't mean anything. I've seen pitches get a lot of interest and then not get the book deal. I've seen pitches get no interest and then get the book deal. So it's really a subjective industry. Just keep your head up, keep trying different things, and best of luck.
CJ, is there anything you want to add?
I don't have anything personally that I would like to announce or promote at this time, but I will take this opportunity to promote a literary festival that's happening in Toronto. It will be occurring around the same time as this goes live in June. It's called Muslim Literary Festival, and it's the first of its kind. It's to promote and advocate for Muslim voices in literature, which are an underrepresented subset of writers. So please attend, please support, and please retweet if you can.
Right, so thank you all to our panelists. Thank you all for watching this video. If you want to know more about this topic, you can check out some panels from last year's, like Beyond Agents Submission Survival from 2022 and Agile Whatever from 2021, which I also moderate. So then that if you like, the panelists will be in the Discord chat to answer any of your questions. And that happy rest of your day and happy WriteHive 2024. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
It was a pleasure